how to operate everything. You take 1 week off, and it's just like it's madness over here. So shalom, shalom, welcome. Panic there for a second, but everything's working out just fine. Welcome to yet another live stream. This is week 14, day one. We're going to do a career day today. Everybody's asking where week 13 went. Week 13 was self study, catch up. It was kind of like the halfway point. It was great to decompress. It was great to take a week off. And I went and spoke at a conference, told medical people how they should be more secure. It was pretty interesting and overall good experience. But now we're back and we are in the action again. So what we're going to do this week is we're going to work on a career day, and we'll cover this in a second. We're going to work on a career day today. We're going to look at report writing, kind of wrap up what we've seen thus far with the Active Directory stuff and all the internal things. We're going to look at a real report. And I'm going to talk through how we do report writing. And then we're going to have a career day in the sense that we're going to look at a resume and how a resume should be written. Today is kind of a catch-up day for me, so I prepped some stuff that was kind of easy for me to get into. So we're kind of going a little in and out of order. But it's because I just got back from travel yesterday or 2 days ago and haven't had a chance to look at anything PNPT related, if I'm being honest with you. So we're going to look at that. And then Friday, I think we're going to do a self-study day. I've got wireless pen testing, so I'm going to show you guys. I'll put the videos online, how to do that. We won't do an actual live stream. We're just going to go ahead and call that day a self-study day. That way I can get everything labs prepared, because now we're heading back into a lab environment. So we're either going to be doing web app pen testing or we're going to be doing some sort of privilege escalation. The issue that I'm going to have with the web app stuff is that we've used Heroku in the past for setting up our labs. Well, Heroku is moving to a non-free environment, I think within the next month or so. So I think we might push to do Heroku now, get that out of the way, and then move on and do our PrivS stuff at the end. But we'll see. I have to make that decision. It's going to be a game time call this week. So in the effort of not having time to build labs out, we're going to do this. Full disclosure, I'll cover this in the next couple streams, but there's going to be a few weeks that I'm going to be out. So we're going to have down weeks for those weeks. I'll probably provide lesson material for you to self-study and cover some items and materials. But there's going to be like 2 or 3 weeks I have of travel in the next 4 to 6 weeks, somewhere around there. So Q4 is just absolutely hectic and crazy. So with that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and get caught up, and we're going to switch over to the screen. Hopefully everything works. Ta-da, here we go. All right, so welcome to week 13, day 25. This is technically the halfway point. I don't think we're going to do a full 25 weeks, not at least of lesson material. The issue is we have, over 50 hours of material, and not all of that material requires live streaming, if that makes sense. So the initial thought was, hey, we're going to have 25 weeks because we got 50 hours of material. Makes sense to me. In this sense, though, when we do like, hey, here's a video on lab building, here's how you build your Active Directory, here's how you build all these things, that takes away from those 50 hours. Same thing with the wireless pen testing or some of the OSINT videos, like OSINT that I couldn't show you on a live stream because it's kind of dangerous. That kind of stuff then leaks over and reduces the time. So we are greater than, in my opinion, 50% of the way through your course. Pat yourself on the back. You guys are killing it, doing awesome. For those of you that are here, again, just like last time, I think we had 5,000 people when we first started. Right now, I'm looking at the chat and we've got 1,200 people. Okay, so you are one of 5 that are left standing. And by the end of this, it'll probably be a little bit less, but we're noticing a little bit around 100 drop off every week. So anyway, with that, as I lecture, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to take a word from our sponsor, and then I'm going to go ahead and drop the code in the chat so you guys can get the thing that you're all here for. Okay, so this live stream is brought to you by IT Pro TV from ACI Learning. Whether you're new to the IT field or a seasoned pro, IT Pro TV's online IT training courses can help you change your life with access to IT training videos, virtual labs, and certification practice tests. Visit IT Pro TV, itpro.tv, and use promo code ITProTV 2022 for 30% off at checkout. That's ITProTV 2022 for 30% off at ITProTV or ITPro.tv. Let you guys take a screenshot of this, and then we're going to go ahead and move over to the next thing. So this is just going to talk about what we're talking about already. Today's career day. We're going to cover report writing, cover resume review. While I talk through this for a split second, I'm going to go ahead and turn on the attendance tracker, and that code today is going to be simple. It's going to be career day. Career day. Hey, we haven't got to a Raid Shadow Legends stream yet, but don't tempt me with a good time because every month the price increases as the popularity of this channel grows. They are starting to offer substantially more, like in the thousands of dollars to do a 2-hour live stream, and it's always very tempting. I haven't sold my soul out yet, but I am not beneath the money. All right, not beneath the money. All right. Anyway, so here's the attendance tracker. We will do 5 minutes of this, and while we do that, I'm going to take you over to the websites. So if you go to, not there yet, if you go to tcm-sec.com, tcm-sec.com. All right, we come through here, we scroll all the way down to the bottom-ish. You see there's a sample pen test report. This is what we're going to be covering, the sample pen test report. All right. You click on download. It should pop open a new tab for you. And ta-da, you have a sample report here. This is a legitimate report. This is a report that was delivered to a client. We're going to talk through this report. You're welcome to download this. If you're interested in other sample materials and everything that we're going to cover today, guess what? There is a GitHub repository for that. I'm going to go ahead and just paste this in. Based on my GitHub, you just go to this in the chat. We have a few things. One should be down here somewhere. A sample pen test resume. We're going to cover resumes today. You can have the example of the resume that I'm giving you in some similar format here. And then we should also have some sample pen test reports in here somewhere as well. And that should allow you, here's the sample pen test report, should allow you to have this demo of a report plus another demo, like an older demo that we had in a document format. So there's also YouTube videos in here if you want to like recap of how to write a report and what we do. That's kind of in there as well. So now let's go ahead and talk through this report. So this is a real pen test report. Let me full screen this. Again, real pen test report delivered to a client. This is a couple years old, obfuscated, got permission, all those fun things. And this is kind of what our report writing looks like nowadays. So this is a lesson in how to write an official report when you go to write one for an organization. If you do an interview for an organization, like for pen testing job, you may be asked to write a report. The more professional your report, the better chances you are of landing that job, in my opinion. And then when it comes down to actually writing reports for clients, you should have a general baseline. What I show you is not necessarily what's going to happen in the real world for you, because everybody has their own reporting standards, and you might see my report and say, hey, I can approve upon that, and that's absolutely fine. But I have seen my report show up in other pen testing reports as well, as in other organizations are using this format nowadays as well. So it's kind of interesting to see. But anyway, you got your cover page. Yay, Demo Corp, Security Assessment Findings Report, Business Confidential, all that fun stuff. Down at the bottom, we just have the same kind of jam down here. Page numbers, I think, are important. Page 1 of 38. Some people don't put a page number on the cover page. Whatever, I don't care. You always put the date of this. You have your project number, at least I do, and then you have your versioning. So let's talk through versioning before we go through anything else. So this is a version 1.0. So how we release things to a client, we have different version control that we go through, right? And this is different at every organization, but this is kind of, I think standard to a point. So basically, when we write a report and we do a pen test, somebody writes a report, they get a 0.1, right? 0.1. That is the version. They've written that report. They submit it to a QA process. So it goes through quality assurance on our side. The quality assurance will review that and they will say, here are some changes you need to make. Here's my edits. And that then becomes 0.2. And that continues through the process. Some jobs, I've been through a job where the QA process was going through a technical QA and then a business QA, meaning they looked at it from a are all your periods in place? Is all of your writing in place? So you have one person that was technical review it, and then you have one person that's really good at writing review it. So you may have version control of, I don't know, 0.1 through 0.9 internally, right? When we release a report to a client, that report becomes 0.9. Why do we do that? Well, because we want them to have time to look it over. We want them to have time to have the opportunity to have a debrief with us and talk through any findings that we report. Sometimes we have a false positive on a report. They might want us to double check something. They might want us to validate or add more information. So once the client is good with the report, they accept the report, then it becomes a version 1.0. If the client were to come back and say, hey, you have a retest period of 90 days, we want you to go ahead and retest this. And we do retesting, we revise the report. Guess what? That becomes a version 1.1. So hopefully that makes sense. Version control is important. Some places we don't include it on our report, but some places will have the actual like name and signature of each version that it went through and what the process was and detail all of that. We don't do that, but that is what the versioning is and why we have a version number on these. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the attendance off. We are good for the day. Either you made it or you didn't. Again, there's more submissions than there are people. So, I love that for us. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and close that out. All right. And now we're going to scroll through this. So we have a table of contents. This is pretty straightforward. If you're not tracking on how to make a table of contents in Word and how these all different headings play into the different subheadings as well, something to look into for your table of contents. But you want to make a nice table of contents, make it easy for somebody going through, especially if it's a massive report. If they say, hey, I want to find this LMNR poisoning, that's all I care about, they know they can go to page 13. Pretty straightforward. All right, so you have your table of contents. When it comes to the rest of this stuff, we have a confidentiality statement that says that, hey, this is between the organization we pen tested and us. Nobody else can have this document. It's confidential. The duplication, redistribution, or use requires consent of both of us. Now, DemoCorp can share this document. Of course, the dogs are barking. DemoCorp can share this document with auditors and other companies that they need to show their penetration test. But basically what we're saying is DemoCorp is not going to take this and TCM Security is not going to take this and just drop it online without the consent of both organizations. All right. So that's that. Another disclaimer, and this is big. This is important. This is what we call CYA in the industry, or cover your ass. All right. CYA. We are doing a penetration test, but this is a snapshot in time. We are looking at a pen test from 1 week time period, usually. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. This is only the findings and recommendations, what we gathered during this time frame. Okay. And time-limited engagements do not allow for full evaluation of all security controls. They just don't. So we try to identify the weakest controls an attacker would exploit. This means that some things can be missed. It's true. It happens. You just don't have enough time. There's not enough time in the day or the week for you to cover everything that's going to be found in a pen test. All right. So you look for low-hanging fruit. So with that out of the way, we have contact information. Who was the main point of contact? What do they do over here? Who is the lead pen tester? Blah, blah, blah. If there's multiple people working the engagement on either side, you put them all in here. And then we come through and we have our assessment overview. This is kind of where we talk about what happened here. In the assessment overview, we did this pen test from February 22nd to March 5th of 2021. They engaged to evaluate their security in an internal penetration test. So we say, hey, what is it that we actually performed? Our testing is based on NIST 800. So we provide that as a framework. We do our web app testing on OWASP guidelines, and then we also have customized testing framework. What that looks like here is basically what this little outline is. I hate this chart, by the way. We've talked about replacing it. We eventually will. But essentially, it's, hey, we do planning, discovery, attack, and reporting. When we do our planning and discovery, if we do an attack and we break in, hey, we're probably going to go back and do some additional discovery and then attack again. Lateral move it until we can move vertically, right? Same thing. You move vertically, go up. Might need to do more enumeration, go back through, and then we report on all that. All right. So this is a basic framework, pretty standard. In terms of assessment components, this is what we do during the engagement. This is just high level. So this says, hey, we performed an internal pen test. Here's what an internal pen test is. It's a brief summary over that. All right. So easy breezy so far. You will get asked as a pen tester, especially if you're doing sales, how, and we had this conversation literally yesterday, it comes up all the time. How do you assess severity? Where do you go with this? Okay, so we have our severity ratings. So that way, when we call something critical, what does the client know? Like, how can they reference and come back and say, oh yeah, that was critical. What does critical mean? Okay, so we line it up with the CVSS score. We also give it definition. So like critical, exploitation is straightforward and usually results in system level compromise. If we've got remote code execution, probably critical, okay? It's advised to form a plan of action and patch immediately. So this is telling you, hey, this is risk prioritized. Critical, you want to address first. Informational, hey, it might just be for your information, all right? We also look at the risk factors. This is how we evaluate and assess risk. So there's two risk factors that we look at, likelihood and impact. Now, likelihood is what's the chance of this happening? What in the impact is, what is the impact if this does happen? And I'm going to give you a couple examples. So if for some reason we're assessing an organization and that organization is we're performing an external pen test on that organization. And the organization, and I've seen this before, has Cisco on their outside facing router. For some reason it's public. And you log in with default credentials, and then you have access to the router that's also internal. In that sense, the likelihood of that being found is pretty high. It's default credentials on the external facing web. Very high likelihood. The impact of that, probably pretty critical. If you can log into a router and you can do some damaging things, I would say that needs to be patched pretty immediately. What if we are on an internal network and we get remote code execution, but that remote code execution occurs behind a internal network that is segmented only to admin users, and only like 5 people in the whole company can access this network. It was a machine on the network that had remote code execution because it wasn't patched. Okay, what's the likelihood of that happening? Well, somebody has to break into the organization or be a malicious insider. That person has to get into the admin network, and then they have to run that exploit. So there's a lot of things that have to chain there. Could an admin do that? Yeah. I mean, I guess the malicious admin could do that, but a malicious admin already has access to that machine, so there's no need for them to go ahead and run remote code execution against the machine that they already own. So in this sense, the likelihood of that happening, probably pretty low. The impact is still very high. Like, you still want to patch this, but maybe it's not a critical anymore. Maybe it's a high, maybe it's a moderate, so we have to weigh what's going on in front of us. It's same thing. Like, if we have a web app that we're assessing and the web app is behind IP allow lists and only certain users can get to that limits the likelihood of an attack, as opposed to like a Facebook, for example, where everybody can sign up for an account and access it. The likelihood then would change. So, all right. So here we go. We're going to scroll through that. We also want to include the scope that we had. So we had internal pen test. We would put all the subnets that are in here. In this instance, I just put a /8. This was a huge network. It wasn't a /8. There was like, I don't even know, probably like 30 or 40 different subnets on this one. We were not allowed to perform denial of service. That is almost always out of scope, like 99.9% of the time, unless an organization asks you to perform denial of service because they are curious to see if you can perform that against them. All right. Now, with the phishing and social engineering, we did not perform that. That may occur. Usually does not happen on internal pen tests. Usually happens on the external facing side of things. All right. In terms of client allowances, the client was so kind to provide us internal network access for our Dropbox. And in this instance, they actually had to allow us access, port access as well, because their firewall was properly blocking our VPN. So that was really good. Outside of that, we have to note, or we not outside of that, we just have to note that, hey, they gave us access. We didn't like go break in and drop a box. They provided that for us. So they were kind enough to do that. So scroll through, and then we have the executive summary. This is where your writing really comes into play. And attention to detail here is going to be very key. So we basically talk about like, hey, again, here are the dates we tested. This provides a high-level overview of what's discovered. Now, your executive summary is for the C-suite. It's for the people that are your CEO or your non-technical, maybe. It's for people that may get a hold of this report later, like an auditor or like a shareholder or a stakeholder, somebody that may see this report that's not technical but can still understand what is going on. So we talk about, hey, what were the scoping and time limitations? No denial of service, no social engineering. Sometimes companies will scope you out, meaning that they will put you into an engagement where they say, hey, we want an internal pen test, but you can only test from this subnet and you can't test anything else, and don't look here. So it behooves us to make sure that we note that scoping limitation, both here and in the scope section, because what happens if that network that we didn't touch gets hacked? What happens? We don't want to have liability for that, because we want to be able to say, hey, our hands were tied. They handcuffed us for this organization or through this pen test, and we only could do what we could do. So here is why it's so important to put a scope in. Same thing with the time limitations. We want to say, hey, here it was permitted for 10 business days. Again, time limitation on pen testing makes it very difficult to assess everything. And in those 10 days is all we got. So if there's a significant change that happens after those 10 business days that leads to compromise, we don't want anything to do with that. It's not our liability. They went and changed something. So we want to do as much CYA throughout this whole process as we can. All right. Now, in the testing summary, we give a very high-level overview. It says, hey, here's what we looked at when we're testing. So we perform vulnerability scanning. We look at LMNR poisoning, SMB relaying, IPv6 attacks, et cetera, et cetera. So this kind of just says, hey, this is what we're doing in this to get the biggest picture of everything that's going on here. We here then talks about what we discovered. So we found LMNR was enabled in the network, and we reference that. That's finding one. We found that we were able to intercept hashes. We were able to go offline and crack those hashes, which signals a weak password policy. Hey, finding 5, right? So utilizing the passwords, we were able to gain access to other machines, and we just kind of tell the narrative here of the story. What is the story that happened? And then we provide a full domain walkthrough for finding 25. So you just want to come through and give them the narrative that they have. With that, we come through and we say, hey, this is the critical findings that we found, the remainder of findings, and this changes, okay? So if there's no critical findings, there's only high or moderate findings, we might talk through the high or moderate findings. If there's only low findings, we might just talk through the low findings. It just depends on that. In this instance, there were so many critical findings. This is the first time they went through a pen test that we left out all high, moderate, low, and informational findings in this. And we said, hey, go ahead and just look at the technical findings section if you want to see the rest of those. So we just wanted to make sure that they were aware that this is just critical findings. So this is a pretty good pen test for us. And we also give, in some engagements, we give the tester notes and recommendations. So we want to talk through it's not first person, but it's kind of first person of what did we see and what can we recommend to them outside of just a generic statement, which are the blanket statements that you saw on the top part of the testing summary. Here it says, hey, these are results indicative of an organization undergoing its first pen test. Many of the findings are default findings with Active Directory. So we saw really two concepts that stood out here that allowed for compromise. Weak password policy, weak patching. We were able to get into a lot of accounts because of these things. We make the recommendation that they reevaluate their password policy and they consider a password policy of 15 or more characters for regular users, 30 or more characters for domain admins. So we kind of just talk through the narrative here of what we see and why we see it from our eyes, where these are more blanketed statements. Like we can, we gained access and we cracked hashes, and these are the findings. This is more of here's what went down, here's what's really bad for you. And that way, somebody who is non technical can kind of read through this and say, this is really what we need to do. Okay. So we also try to give kudos where we can. So it says, hey, on a positive note, the testing team triggered several alerts. We were able to get through those. They alerted us. Not all the attacks were discovered, but alerting is a positive start. Additional guidance for alerting and detection has been provided on the findings, which we do perform. So you'll see that here in a little bit. We also talked through the strengths and weaknesses. So remember, we want to get caught. So we were caught running Nessus. That's great. Good baseline. They detected vulnerability scanning. They detected us running Mimikatz. Great. We saw that their service counts when we ran Kerberos were not running as domain administrators. That's really good. And then the local administrator accounts were unique to each device. Remember, we talked about that in a couple of the examples that we've seen, that the local admin accounts, if they're using the same password over and over, then we just get into any computer that we want to. In this instance, they were using LAPS, which allowed them to have unique local admin hashes or passwords for every single machine, which is great. All right, so we also identify the weaknesses, like the key weaknesses. We're not going to cover every single one. I think there were 25 findings. We just talked through 13 things. So, hey, password policy was found to be insufficient. Critically out-of-date operating systems. We saw clear text passwords due to wdigest, so forth. I'm not going to read through every single one of these, but we'll look through the different findings and write-ups so that way you have a better understanding. We also give a summary and report card. So essentially, hey, here's how many critical findings they had: high, moderate, low, informational. This is a great example, by the way. I'm sure they had low findings in the network, but we had 2 weeks in there and we found these items that were mostly critical and high. So this is one of those things where we talk about like, hey, it's a time-based engagement. There's no way we're going to find everything. So we're going to give you a risk prioritized report that says, hey, here's what we found. Now, if we come back next year, they fixed all these things. Guess what? Maybe it's less highs. Maybe there's no criticals. Maybe then it just becomes high, moderate, lows, or only moderates and lows. So it just depends on the organization. But when you're time limited, then there's only so many things that you can look at. In this instance, we had no low findings because we just didn't have time to hunt for those. Okay, so come through. These are all the findings. And what this does, and by the way, attention to detail. This is something I wanted to point out, especially depending on the time that we have today. I want to touch to this because I don't know if we'll get to the resume or not. But we put the finding here. So finding 1, severity rating, and the recommendation. Again, this is a high-level recommendation. We might say disable multicast name resolution via GPO. This doesn't tell you how to fix it. It just says this is what you need to do. Very high level. Again, this isn't for the technical individual. This is for the high-level individual. Something that I point out and something that I look for when I'm hiring for resumes, and this may seem incredibly like nitpicky, but your resume and your report writing should be consistent. Your resume reflects you as an individual. In report writing, as an example, if you're going to put a period here at the end of these statements, put a period on all the statements. If you're not going to put a period, then don't put a period. But consistency is key. Attention to detail is key. In here, I don't want to see period with no periods in some of the other places. Like everything should be the same. And when you have attention to detail like that, these little things, at least to me, tell the client that, hey, they had attention to detail on this report. They had attention to detail with the testing. They're really buttoned up. This isn't like loosely thrown together. They actually care about every little detail, testing wise, reporting wise, everything. It seems minute. I promise you it's not. All right. Now, how does this tie into a resume? Well, I'll see resumes where you have bullet points on the jobs that you're doing. Half of them will have a period, half of them won't. Consistency is key. Make sure you're capitalizing the proper things. Make sure you're talking through the proper things. Like, have consistency and attention to detail in your resume, in your reporting, and you'll get so much further in life, I promise. Somebody said justified text looks neat. Yes, I love justified text. And if you're not tracking what justified text is, this is justified. When it goes all the way to the edge like this, that's justified. I'm a huge fan of this. Think of it like newspaper print. Not all the time does it look good, but for writing like these kind of summaries, it looks great. Like here, we don't need it right here, but in that sense, it looks great. Okay, so coming through, we come in and we have our findings. Same thing here. Like you want to have similar structure, right? Like internally, the team hates me for this, but eventually you learn, you go through the process, and then somebody else will hate them when they're reviewing their reports, right? But you want to have these like consistent things, like here, like this little bit of gap, in between. Like if you're going to have a gap on the one page, you better have a gap on every single page. I've seen reports where there's gaps and then this is missing here. Like you want to have consistency across the board. When somebody looks at page 1, it should be the same as page 2, or finding 1 should be the same as finding 2. We do our best to keep our findings in the technical section down to 1 page, though sometimes they may require more of a narrative. I think a lot of us have gotten hung up on the process of having to detail out, especially with like exam reports and write-ups and everything else. Like we have to detail every single step of everything that we did, and we need to give this full narrative with every detailed picture, and that is not true. In my opinion, that's not true. I can convey exactly what happens in 1 page. I need to be concise. The people that want to look at this, they want things to be concise. We can still give a narrative. We can talk through it. That's what the steps to domain admin are for. We do not need to have a 100, 200-page report. You want to be concise. They need to go to the finding that they have. They want to be able to know exactly what it is that you found and why it is that you found that, all right? Okay, so in this instance, we have a description here. Okay, we say, hey, here's the finding. Here's what it is. It's critical. Okay, it's LM&R poisoning, one of our favorites, right? They allow multicast name resolution on their network. Now, I forget what the type of somebody here is good with English and format will know, but I forget what the type of speech that this is. But you want to say like, hey, this organization permitted it. They allowed it. Not, oh, we found this in the network and they had LM&R poisoning. No, this organization permitted this to happen. All right, it's not passive, right? It's whatever the opposite is. But so we wanted to be direct with the statement. They allowed it to happen. We captured 20 user account hashes, and we were able to crack 2 by using commodity software. And here we said, hey, the cracked results or the cracked accounts were used to leverage further access that led to compromise of the domain controller. Active writing, that is it. Yeah, passive active. Great job. It's active. And we talked through the likelihood, right? The likelihood this happens is high. This attack is effective in environments allowing multicast name resolution. Okay, yes, it's not very high because we still have to do something, right? We have to have social engineering. We have to break into the network. All the likelihoods are probably just going to be high for this report. But the impact of this is very high because we're able to capture the hash. We're able to crack it offline. Same thing. What tools do we use in this process? Well, we use Responder and we use Hashcat. Here's a great write-up on Responder and how to fix it and what it is, all that stuff. We always put that in there. Here are the NIST tie-ins here. It looks like that link's actually not working. Whoops. But here are the NIST tie-ins and how they relate to NIST 853, device identification, authentication, configuration settings. We tie that into our references as well. Okay. In this instance, we provide a couple screenshots. Here's figure 1. We captured a hash from an account called production. This was an NTLM v1 hash, actually, not even v2. In this instance, we got this production account. And sorry, a lot of it's blurred out, but we're just showing you, hey, like this was the hash. Here's the password to crack to. All right. Remember, last time we said, hey, in the executive level, it said disable multicast name resolution via GPO. Okay, but here it says for mitigation detection guidance, visit the MITRE guidance here. talks through the cracked hash, talks through network access control and application whitelisting, etc. So again, high level overview, more detail in the technical findings section. All right. Come through. You have finding number 2. Same thing. Local admin password reuse. We had some local admin hash that was gathered, and we were able to reuse it in some places. This was actually leveraged into 50 machines, and that was that allowed us to get into other devices, kind of like we've seen before. I guess I was talking about them having laps. I guess they had laps on some machines, but not all machines in this network. So this was a local, or this was a reuse of a admin, not the admin account. This might have actually been a local admin on that machine. So here we were able to use that and leverage, and we used crackmap exec with the local auth, and we were able to pass that around. We got into 50 or so machines, and that is what this is talking through. Hey, we used Impact, we used crackmap exec. Here's the MITRE definition. Here's the pen test tails that we have from our TCM sec blog, right? Somebody asked about the blurring. We don't blur much in our report. This blurring is because this is a real report that is obfuscated to not determine who the client was. All right. Majority of this stuff has been patched in their network. It's not a big concern at this point. It's just one of those things that you don't want to identify. So we block all this out. In a real report, nothing would be obfuscated except maybe part of the hash, just so that we don't reveal a hash, and partly part of the passwords we would also obfuscate as well. So anything that could be like allow access to an account or anything along those lines will blur out. Otherwise, the account, whatever we have in here, anything identifying is left in. All right. So in this instance, we leveraged access to approximately 50 machines. In this instance, we didn't put all those 50 machines. We just said system all here. Because this vulnerability could apply more to just one place, we're just going to say, hey, this applies to all systems. If it was like 1 or 2 machines, we'd put those in there. But because we saw it network wide, we just went ahead and threw the word all in there. So coming through here, W digest, this is something that we talked through but didn't see exactly in the lab environment. We saw it in a few of the blog posts. Remember, Windows 7, Windows 8, Server 2008, Server 2012, you're going to have clear text passwords upon login. Doesn't matter how secure your password is. So what had happened in this situation was we had access to all those machines, right? Say the 50 machines that we gained access to. We can go in there and we can perform dumping on those machines, secrets dump. Secrets dump will show you passwords in clear text. So here's what we're seeing. We're seeing the passwords in clear text because of W digest. So these SUP, these users were super users. So it was like super user with the initials of the user after the end of it. And then you could see the different passwords that were here. Okay. And we just show them the first letter in this instance. So they know, like, hey, they know, we know kind of thing. We don't reveal the password, especially of a domain admin account. So in this instance, we maybe got onto a server like a server 2012 or something with that credential. Those domain admins were logging into that server. W digest was enabled. We were able to see those passwords in clear text. All right. So come through. I'm not going to cover the remediations for everything. We've talked through this already. Here in this sense, hey, we were able to impersonate somebody. We talked about token impersonation through the different users, right? So we have the user we were able to impersonate, become that user. We are now that user. Okay. Same thing we saw in our lab environment. This does happen in the real world. Next finding, insufficient password complexity. When we compromise the domain controller, we go through and we dump out the ntds.dit. We talked about this in our labs. We'll take those and we'll start cracking those passwords. Typically, we provide the percent. For some reason here, we didn't. We were able to crack 2,200 account passwords in this, all right? 17 of the cracked passwords were domain administrators. So one, they have way too many domain admins. Like some of these weren't all just like domain admin accounts. They were like service accounts or not service accounts. They had some like overly permissive accounts for no reason. And we cracked 2,200 passwords, which is crazy. And then their domain admins had just weak password policy. So this is a huge sign of a weak password policy. I'm not sure the percentage. I think it was greater than 50%. Like we may have had 4,000 accounts or less, and we cracked over half of those. That's a terrible, terrible password policy. So we just show them like, hey, here are the accounts we cracked. Here are the passwords we cracked, and kind of give them that idea when we go through this. All right. So again, weak password policy in an organization combined with like LM&R poisoning, reuse, anything is going to take down an organization very quick. Here, security misconfiguration, IPv6 relay attacks. We talked about this. This is just evidence of a relay attack succeeding on a network. Here's all the remediation steps. This should look very familiar to you. I'm not going to go in detail. Just know IPv6 was in their network as well. I kind of want to walk through this to show you like what things that we're writing on and why they're critical or what we're seeing. SMB signing being disabled. We were able to do a successful SMB relay attack. You can see that here. Again, this is going to be critical because this allows us access to a machine, kind of like we defined earlier on, right? So keep going through. Insufficient patch management software. Lots of things in their environment were unpatched. So we just put this all together and said, hey, here's all the things in your environment that we're seeing that are critical at this point that need patching. These are all critical and high rated deprecated softwares, actually, is how we listed this. So, and then we put a file in here that suggested anything that they needed to update to, what the latest versions were, et cetera. I just removed that file from this document. Okay, come through. Insufficient patch management for operating systems. That's its own finding. Hey, look, they had server 2003, 2008, XP, 7, old Ubuntu, old FreeBSD. Very old network, very complex. You could probably, based on this, you could probably guess one of two industries that they might be in. So we usually typically see old devices in very particular industries, especially when we get down to like XP and Server 2003. Not always true, but they seem to be pretty prevalent in one or two industries, in my opinion. Hospitals will be one, yes. Government would be two, right? So legacy, anything where it takes time, effort, resources to replace, or the devices may not need updated or they're end of life, but they can't replace, kind of thing. So usually hospitals, government, education's a good one. I don't see it in banking a lot. Banking's usually up to date. Banking has a lot of regulation. I could be wrong on that, but in the banks that we've pen tested, they've been pretty well kept. Okay, so we're gonna get into these really fast. So here's where we start talking about remote code execution capable exploits. And people have asked me like, hey, what do I do if I find like Eternal Blue? We've had Eternal Blue in this course, right? If we talk about Eternal Blue, we see it on an engagement. Do we immediately fire at that machine? No, I don't think so. Usually we'll say, hey, we see this machine. Is it sensitive? Can we attack it? Because Eternal Blue can take down a machine. Absolutely can. Same thing with any of these other remote code execution exploits. In this instance, we did not attempt to exploit any vulnerabilities due to denial of service. We were in a situation where we had compromised domain controller. We had compromised all the things we needed to do, and we weren't worried about getting onto another machine via another. There's no point. Like, could we have done it, pat ourselves on the back? Yeah, absolutely. We could exploit these. But in this situation, it wasn't necessary. So we only do Eternal Blue if it's necessary. Like, hey, we don't have any footholds. We need to get on this machine to get a foothold in the network. Absolutely, we'll do it in that situation. We're still going to ask permission because it could cause denial of service. But we wanted to, I just want to point out, like, here it's fine to show, like, hey, we ran a script against it to show the vulnerabilities there. It shows it's likely vulnerable. We're going to write this up as unpatched. Easy enough. We don't have to go in and actually exploit it and show proof of that. Okay. Okay. And same thing, MS 12020. These are all going to be Microsoft vulnerabilities right here. Eternal Blue is there. Same thing. You can run an auto blue checker on here and just say, hey, is it patched? No, it's not patched. All right. So we don't need to exploit this. We can just say it's not patched. Blue Keep was on here. Again, unpatched. All right. Kerber roasting. We were able to roast some accounts through Kerber roasting, and we were able to crack 4 account passwords, meaning their service accounts had weak passwords. No service accounts are running as domain administrator. Good job. Kudos for them. But they still were accounts. They could still lead to other things. Who knows what permission settings they have or what access they have, especially with service accounts. So just as a heads up. But so in this instance, again, same thing. All these things that we talked through in the course are real life things. Like these are all real world. Hey, this will show up in a pen test. So like everything that you've learned so far, especially in the Active Directory section, you can go take and apply to a real pen test today. All right. So GPP credentials. Remember GPP? We talked about it being an old school attack. It's still out there, man. It's still out there. This pen test is from 2021. Still saw it, especially in domains that are very old. And then you just got these credentials sitting out there. Clear text. Clear text. Easy breezy. So real world stuff here. No picture here. Insufficient authentication for VNC. They had a VNC, actually very dangerous. Can't really go into it, but let's just say manufacturing of sorts. It was an industrial control system of sorts, had VNC access, unauthenticated, could remote into the machine and perform actions against that machine. What that would do to those machines or what that would do to the devices they were controlling, who knows? Didn't try it, didn't want to try it, didn't want to find out. So anyway, you can and will see unauthenticated VNC. You'll see unauthenticated file shares, access to things that you shouldn't have, and you would write that up as insufficient authentication. Default credentials. We talked about these last time, right? Or sometime. On web services, like, hey, here's us logging into their iDRAC here. Pretty cool. Printers, right? We've talked about getting remote code execution on printers, networking devices, all kinds of stuff. We were able to log into a ton of them. And in fact, only a sample set. And we provided them that and said, hey, like, we didn't have time to check all these, but you should probably go through and check these because we're seeing a consistent theme throughout. So there was a lot of default credentials that could lead to attacks that could escalate privileges later on. People are saying Calvin. Yes. Oh, Calvin, indeed. Listable directories. In this sense, do we normally report on this? It just depends on what it is. In this one, we did because you could access this this directory, and it had like admin API, administrator. It was like the full source code for this directory. And who knows how dangerous that is if it gets into the wrong hands, even internally. So you want to disable that or limit access to that application. Going through SMB share access, same thing. We're able to log into a machine without a credential. Just log right in. No credentials needed. Full open share, right? This is a C drive. We're able to print that out and get access to it. So pretty cool. And happens a lot, more so than you would think. There's all kinds of misconfigurations. It's your job to find them. SMB v1, very dangerous to have on the network. I'd say the majority of attacks that we do internally have to involve SMB of some sort. If you have old SMB, that just makes it worse for you. We saw that on, looks like just one system in this instance, but still, we're going to report on that. IPMI hash disclosure. I mean, this is a very common vulnerability that I don't even think there's no patch available for. Just one of those things, like if you don't have strong passwords on these accounts, we can dump out the hashing on the IPMI, and we see this all the time on internals as well. SNMP community strings, public strings, okay, allows us to get access and see and enumerate some detail about things here, right? Not always public strings, like they're public, but it doesn't always have to be the word or it's community, right? Community doesn't always have to be the word public. If you run ettercap in a network, which can take down a network, so be cautious on how you run that and how long you run it for. I haven't shown you ettercap, but you can pick up like community strings in clear text as they're passed through the network. I've been able to get access to weird things using ettercap before, and just seeing like uh, God, I think there was like I don't know what it was, like Pop 3 or something. I forget what it was floating around the network. Maybe it was IMAP, like a unsecure IMAP floating around the network, which had to log into an email account and password, and I was able to like log into that email account and gain access to some stuff. So there's just weird things that happen on networks, especially when you're just sitting in a man in the middle position. Telnet. Anytime we see Telnet, that's a write up. Don't use Telnet. It's unsecure. Terminal configuration. So no network level authentication or NLA on the on remote desktop. So if you're not using NLA, that's not great. Moderate finding. We didn't gain access from it, but still can be intercepted. All right. And then steps to domain admin. So just kind of walks through like, hey, we poisoned LM&R, got some hashes. Here's your basic remediation recommendation. We're able to crack the hashes. Okay, increase your password complexity, utilize multi-factor, implement privileged access account management or PAM solution, utilize password filtering, et cetera, et cetera. You were able to leverage that account to gain access to several machines. That allowed us to, or you want to limit the local admin privileges and enforce least privilege there. We were able to dump hashes on the machines and then use clear text password, a bartender account for via wdigest. That account allowed us to gain access to a lot of machines in the network. It was like overly permissive. I remember running Bloodhound in this situation, seeing that account had like access to everything, and then we were able to find it, and that basically got us to where we needed to be. Eventually, dumped hashes on machines, found password, clear text password of a DA, utilized that to log into the domain controller, and voila. So from there, that's pretty much it. You have your last page. You provide some additional report information, like we provide them a folder that has additional scans and reports. That'll be their Nessus reports, any supplementary documentation, anything that we want to provide them above and beyond what's in this report. Remember, this report is the risk prioritized report. This says that, hey, we go through and we're showing you what we found low hanging fruit, but we may provide the Nessus scan, which has all those low and moderate findings that maybe we just didn't get to. So we provide them the extra detail to say, hey, here it is. This is what we were able to see, but here's more of what we found beyond, above and beyond this report. All right, where are we at in time? 12:53. Okay, no resume roasting. We'll leave that, I guess, for another time. We'll have a different career day. I guess this wasn't really a career day at the end of the day. This will help you for your careers. You just need to make sure that you understand the attention to detail is very important, and that this is the level of writing that should go into enter reports, and this is how a professional report looks like in the real world, which I don't know many places that will show you that. There are GitHub repositories of pen test reports that are out there, but I don't think they're great if you want my opinion on it. But that's that, my friends. I'm going to come back to the screen. So we'll take this to 125. I don't know if I got this. I got this when I was on travel. I never drank it. I don't know if I like this flavor. It tastes like cough syrup. Do you have an internal pen test checklist you can share, like the external one? We do have an internal one. It's not public currently. If I ever get around to making the internal pen test playbook, I will release that released that as well, but currently it's not public. Do you think writing walkthroughs after CTF is a good way to practice report writing? It's decent. Like, I would say yes and no, because the issue with CTFs is CTFs are like very detailed walkthroughs, right? It's like, here are the steps that we took and everything else. I think if you wanted to do it for yourself, you could take a CTF and say, hey, how would I write this as a finding for, for a pen test? And how would I write that up? And then maybe you have the steps to compromise and you put those in, you put those steps in detail form, but you have like your high level findings. Any sort of writing is good. Just like I see a lot of people get into the habit of doing walkthroughs and write ups that way, and then they try to write reports that way, and that's not really how reports should be presented, in my opinion. But why were the steps to domain admin classified as informational? Because it's information. We already showed all the steps and findings. This is just for their information. Is it critical that we compromise the domain controller? Yes, it's not. But the what how we're presenting it and providing it is just as extra information for them. Do you need to give the steps of replication? We do provide that in a sense. Like we don't give the whole detail, right? Like it's up to them if they want to go run those tools and stuff. A lot of the clients that we have are not incredibly technical in the hacking sense, but everything that we provide, like when we provide references and stuff, they can go and then use those tools. If they had questions and they say, hey, we want to duplicate this. Can you send over how you would do that? Then yeah, we would do that. But most of the clients aren't interested in doing that. A lot of what they do is they go and they fix the issue, and then they'll have us come back and do retesting on those the remediations. So, what application do you use for writing the report? Uh, Good old Microsoft Word. We don't uh, we don't pay for report writing tools yet. I have a friend that told me that he got one of the report writing tools. They're a small company. I think they're 10 people and they paid $29,000 for one annual license for a report writing tool. And that is just, it's too much. I don't think we spend $29,000 worth of time writing reports yet. So, do you show in the reports all the passwords that you found in clear text? What are your suggestions about it? So clear text is disabling W digest, right? The suggestions in there. We do not show clear text passwords in a report unless it's something that we feel is harmless. We will provide a password protected document if the client wants it of all the accounts and stuff that we found, which usually the client does want it. That way they can go make those people change their passwords. They can put those passwords in a deny list type thing, and kind of go from there. So. Would you report a SQL injection if you found a vulnerable app running on 8443 in a network pen test? Um, there's not really a need to be testing for SQL injection. If you came across a web app that was vulnerable to SQL injection, I think you'd be wasting your time performing SQL injection on the app unless you were desperate and you needed access to the application. For the most part, you're not chasing web app vulnerabilities in a network pen test, especially internally. There's way bigger fish to fry than that. If something pops on like an SS scan and says, "Hey, SQL injections here," great. You just say, "Hey, patch this server." But again, time depending. If you had unlimited access, you can go maybe chase that down, or unlimited time. But there's just not time to chase those things down. They're usually high effort, low reward. As a pen tester, we're naturally curious. There's no such thing as being too curious while conducting pen testing for a client. Um, I mean, I guess like nothing is usually off limits, but there's like ethical gray areas, I would guess, right? Like you don't want to go digging through somebody's personal email unless you have a reason to do it. Like if you break into an account and you think that email can, do something for you, then you can go sort through their, dig through their passwords or whatever it might be. If you find like somebody's file share and it's got like personal photos on there, you don't want to go digging through their personal photos. Now, if there's like a photo of a password in there, that's different. But you can get a general gist of what you're looking at. Same thing like with healthcare. You don't want to go digging for social security numbers and people's personal information if you don't have to. Now, if we see like a social security number in like a document that's unprotected that we come across, or if we see one in like a email or something that somebody sent out, we're going to screenshot that and say, "Hey, this is bad practice." But we're not going to go hunting for sensitive data like that. So, you can successfully remove your Active Directory stuff. I don't think we'll need it anymore. So, question was, can you remove the Active Directory VMs? Do you need to do full presentation for the findings? That is up to the client. So we give the option to that. So we say, hey, would you like a debrief? And I'd say it's 50% of the time. We try to write a report into the point of where they understand. Some bigger organizations, a lot of cooks in the kitchen is a good way to put it, and they want to sit down and have all the cooks in one place being read the report. Some other organizations, they take the report, they say, "Yep, we understand everything that's here. Thank you. We'll take it from here." So just depends if the client wants a debrief or not. So the question is, when having a finding on an industrial control system, wouldn't it be flagged as critical? They are usually important systems that can cause important impacts on the organization. Yeah, there could be. I don't remember the justification for marking it medium there, but there could be argument to mark it as critical as well. So it's been a couple of years since we tested that, so there's got to be a reason we marked it as medium, but there definitely could be a reason for marking as critical. What software do you use to send the report since it contains sensitive material? Um, Good question. So I'll be straightforward with you. We are a Google Suite company, G Suite company. Traditionally, we have been using Google Drive with permission settings enabled. The access control that Google Drive provides is sufficient, but it's not amazing, if that makes sense. Like least privilege isn't really a thing. It's just kind of like somewhat decent role based access control. When you provide a report to a client that's not on a Google based platform, you either have to open that wide up and say, "Hey, like anybody with this link can access this," which is dangerous if the link gets compromised, or you could say, hey, they need to sign up for a Google account in order to access this, which isn't great either. So we're actually in the process of migrating over to a different platform. And to deliver that, you could think of like Dropbox, Box, ShareFile, some platform similar to that that allows us to have more control over our access rights, essentially. Ever had a client that says they don't believe you cracked their passwords and ask for confirmation of full passwords you cracked? No. Again, this comes down to the providing the cracked passwords to the client if they want it. So we're happy to provide them, but nobody's ever challenged us on if we've cracked the passwords. I think compromising the domain controller usually is proof enough. So. So where are the other videos? Good question. So they're asking about the video on demand. Where can you find them? Video on demand is found on Twitch, though Twitch only holds for 60 days. So if you're looking for historical videos, those are nowhere to be found 60 days past. So I think we're like probably day 70 or 80 at this point. So you're probably not going to find weeks 1 and 2 or maybe even 3 anymore. The PNPT with training, if you purchase that, gets access to all the VODs. Or if you are an all access pass member, you get access to all the VODs as well. So that would be the only two places that you can get it through the academy. How many times does your team peer review the content of a report before submitting it to your clients? It's a great question. Depends on the report. We all have bad days, right? If somebody writes a really good report, uh, there's always edits. Like we always miss something. That's why you have somebody QA. There's never a perfect report, but um, you go through the QA process. Ideally, it's one QA, ship it. Sometimes it takes two or three QAs. Sometimes you push it back, you find another mistake, you find something that you want improved, and you just go through the process. But just it just depends on the situation. Your best and worst pen test experiences. I won't give specific details. I'll just say that there are good clients and there are bad clients. The good clients are the ones that are there for security improvement purposes. They're there because they want to be there. They're there because they want to learn from you. And then there are bad clients that think you are the enemy. They think that, like, hey, I have to pay you to be here. You're going to find bad stuff. It's going to look bad on me, and you're going to get me fired, which is farthest from the truth. So if you treat your pen tester like your enemy, I wouldn't say it's going to be a bad day for you. It's just not. It's not a great approach. Like, we're there to be your friend. We're there to be your ally. We're there to help you strengthen your security. We're not there to throw anybody under the bus. Same thing with like social engineering. The people that we get to submit their passwords, click on links, are usually the best when it comes to advocating and training because they've been through it. They know they become better off from it. So I'm anti ever firing somebody for clicking on a link or anything through training. Like, we highly advocate for those people because they usually become your best trainers. So it's one of those things that, like, if you just want to be a good client, you just want to be acceptable of the results, and you want to be friends with your pen test team, because at the end of the day, we're here to help you. We're not here to make you look bad by any means. The pen test time. So the question is, let's say you have 10 days to do a pen test. How many days do you actually pen test versus write a report? Do you give like 2 to 3 days for report writing, like the exam? Yeah. So typically, let's say we have an engagement that's a week long, like five business days. That whole 5 days is dedicated to doing the pen test. Then the next week is report writing. So you may have until, usually we require our reports to be in by Wednesday of the next week, for that way that they can get QA'd by Thursday and report out on Friday. So typically, though, you're usually juggling, right now you're juggling two jobs. Like, the way that we operate is that you do your pen test, and then if you've got a pen test next week, guess what? You're working on that pen test while you're writing your report. So you'll hear a lot of like experienced pen testers say to report as you go, and that is entirely true. Like, you should be writing up your findings as you find them, and like documenting that, and then just throwing that into a report and making your life as easy as possible. Especially like internals and stuff. Once you lose access to your Dropbox and you're waiting for that to be shipped back, you don't have all of your screenshots, all those things. It's going to make it quite difficult for you to write a report the next week. So you want to do as many things as you can ahead of time, and not procrastinate the report, because especially if you're in busy season like we are now, where we're just like every single week is a new project, it pays dividends to write as you go. I do have 3 monitors. I do. Saw somebody say that. How many individuals from your team are generally engaged in a single pen test? One or more? Does it depend on the size of the client? Yeah, it depends on the size of the client. Usually, like, we can work on the same engagement together. Like, this week, I'm working on an engagement with one of our team members, but he's doing the external pen test. I'm doing the internal pen test. We're sharing notes, we're talking, communicating, but we're not working on the same segment at the same time. If we had like a really big external or something like that, we might both work on the external at the same time. Like, hey, they might do OSINT while I'm doing vulnerability scanning and researching IP addresses or something along those lines. But usually it's a one person to one segment job, though you could be working on the same client at the same time to try to get the task done sooner. What are your views on a job as a SOC analyst? As a freshie, should we pursue? I think it's a great stepping stone job if you're interested in pen testing. So there's a few. Like I think help desk into like SOC analyst, help desk into like network administrator, or some sort of like junior security engineer are all great paths to get into pen testing eventually. What's the best way to sharpen your pen test skills? Uh, Practice. I'm talking about practice. Yeah, just continuing to practice, honestly. And I'm getting the message that we're getting to the point of no great questions left, so that's almost our time. I saw somebody mentioning a Ferrari. I haven't seen the new Ferrari. I'm sure it's way too expensive for me. Think you guys think I make more money than I do. I did for a brief period of time consider buying a Ferrari FF and trading in the Lambo, but um, I don't like. Part of me likes the FF. Part of me doesn't like it. Like I like that it's practical. Like a four-seat Ferrari is pretty cool. That still has 600 and something horsepower. But I can't get over the look of it not being a Ferrari, if that makes sense. So it's one of those like, do you love it? Do you hate it? I'm not sure how you feel about it, but uh have we seen changes in pen tester salaries recently with inflation? I mean, pen tester salaries are incredibly inflated. So it is what it is. I was talking to somebody who was talking about all the pay increases that he just had to give recently just due to inflation. I think we pay pretty well on our end. Like we were ahead of the curve, but we probably still have to do some increases accordingly. But yes, the salaries are going up in the pen test industry. The new Corvette looks great. Yeah, I'm not a Corvette fan, but the new Corvettes are very, very nice. The only issue I have with Corvette is that everybody has one. I feels like um, I live in a relatively like I would say poor state. Like you don't see a lot of really nice cars going around, right? But you see Corvettes everywhere. Even when I lived in Charlotte, you just see Corvettes everywhere. You would see the occasional like McLaren or I think even Bugatti once, but it's like out here, it's just Corvettes are everywhere, and they are. I mean, they're like the break-in kind of almost supercar that everybody buys. So I just there's just too many of them to want to actually own one. So. How many days do we give the dev team for them to remediate, mitigate? We do 90 days. So we have a 90-day retest period, meaning that you can come back within 90 days and we're happy to do retesting for them. If they don't come back within 90 days, there's usually an additional charge if they want us to retest for it. But at the end of the day, it's ultimately on the remediation team internally to do that and figure that out. So. You're about to take up a GRC role. Career growth wise would be ideal. I would definitely appreciate your views. I mean, GRC is okay. You just really have to like that. I think GRC is incredibly boring. Some people are more interested in that. Could it offer or lead to a good career? Sure. I mean, that could lead to CISO level stuff. You could definitely escalate your career, but it just depends on what you want to do and if you find GRC interesting. For me, I don't incredibly love it, but more power to you if you can deal with it. How do you become good at report writing? Practice. Still talking about practice. It's a lot of repetition and doing it over and over again. I could tell you that I was pretty bad at report writing when I first started. It did help that I came from accounting and wrote a lot of reports there, but I still think I was pretty bad. Joe will tell you that Joe was pretty bad. Everybody develops their process. Like now, I get a report from Joe, I barely have to look at it because I know it's exactly what we want. But everybody goes through the hey, get beat up, I suck at this, and you really have to figure out your writing style, and you have to figure out if you have a certain writing style and your organization has a different writing style. That could be conflicting if you don't have the attention to detail, or if you are like just missing little things. Like building out a checklist can work really well for you, but it's just like it's repetition, just like anything else. I'm not seeing anything come up. So who are we rating? Who are we rating today, chat? Who's online? Should we rate Amaranth? Is that who we're going to go for? Where's science and technology? They don't even show it on my categories anymore. That's sad. Sasha Grey. We're not rating Sasha Grey. I don't see why am I not seeing any science and technology people. They don't make this easy to get to by any means. Chris Nova. All right, who's Chris Nova? Okay. Yeah, that looks fine. Coding and Rust. Got it. All right, we'll do that raid. So we'll save the career day for another day, I guess. Friday will be self study wireless. Look out this weekend for lab build for next Wednesday. It's likely going to be web app related, but we'll take it from there and see. All right. All right. So we're rating. Peace out. Love you. Goodbye.